Okay, everybody, thank you for coming to the second episode of the Digression Sessions. For anybody who missed the first one, the Digression Sessions is a new podcast segment I'm starting where I have Xanadu review alumni or people who have yet to appear. We come on and we riff on a specific topic. Today we're going to be talking about the movie Her from 2013 and kind of using that as a springboard to talk about like modern gender relationships, dating, AI, kind of that's all touched in here. So with me right now, I have 3 different guests, possibly a 4th one coming soon. So everybody want to introduce ourselves? I guess I'm starting at the top there with the screen there, if that works for you guys. Hey, Lirpa,
we all have the same. Oh, not on my screen, but hi, I'm Lirpa.
Sorry, I didn't think about that.
That's okay. I'm Lirpa Strike, and I write Just Saying on Substack, and I am a happy alumna of this podcast, and Xanadu as well. So yeah, happy to be here. Happy to talk about this movie.
Great, thanks. Whoever wants to go next, I guess, since the order apparently does not, that makes sense. Now that I think about it, the order of the screen doesn't match for everybody.
Yeah, sure. I'm Theresa. I'm on Substack as Theresa Tallian, and I'm a writer. I live in Chicago, write about culture, history, books, whatever I feel like. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys today.
Thank you.
And lastly, I guess we're going in alphabetical order. Yakubian Ape at Yakubian Ape on Substack. This is I think this is the 3rd time we've sat down, and I'm just happy to be here.
Awesome. So, like I said, we're going to be discussing the movie Her from 2013. For those of us, and maybe in the audience who hadn't heard of it, this is a movie starring Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson, where Joaquin Phoenix plays kind of, your typical, 2010s, sad boy, and he falls in love with Scarlett Johansson, which is his operating system, like an AI operating system. So this is something that I felt was very ahead of the curve, and I was thinking about it a lot lately. It'd be good to discuss with some fun people like you. So I guess we'll start out just talking about the movie itself. Like, first question, like, did you see it initially when it came out, or did you just see it for the first time when we were going to talk about this? And like, what were your impressions, whenever you saw it? Because for me, I saw it, I think it was like 2014, something like that, like not too long after it was released, when I first started dating my now wife. And it was very interesting. We can kind of get into that part a little bit more when we talk about the relationship side of it. But at the time, I remember thinking that it was a neat sci-fi, because I feel like that was something kind of underrated in the discussion. And also just like a really good relationship story about, breaking up, obviously anybody watching this or listening to it, total spoilers, but breaking up not because of some big dramatic event, but because you just kind of grow apart sometimes. So I remember really liking it at the time, and then rewatching it. I rewatched it just last night, and in so many ways it was so prophetic in ways that were not overt. And it hits even harder emotionally. So I'm curious to what you guys think and what your experience was.
I saw it when it first came out, actually. I remember it very, very distinctly because I was up visiting a friend in Oklahoma, over there by Oklahoma City, when we were all in college, and I was going through a romantic issue of my own at the time, and it like hit me like a freight train, and it was probably my favorite movie of the year for that reason. Like it would really spoke to me in a lot of ways that we will probably get into later.
Yeah, well, I hadn't seen it until this week, and I think at the time for some reason I thought I wouldn't like it, and I was actually really surprised. I did like it a lot, and I wish I had seen it sooner. Story was good. I thought the characters were interesting. Obviously the premise feels more relevant than ever, but it's also just like an aesthetically really nice looking movie. It great music, and I enjoyed it a lot.
I also hadn't seen it until yesterday. I watched it last night, and yeah, it wasn't what I expected. I expected something, I guess, a little more lighthearted or maybe more like jokey dystopian, kind of like some of the others that have come out. But I don't know, it was more emotional, and it did hit hard because like I felt like I could relate to each of those characters at some point or another, and maybe that's just like my life right now. But like I was really intrigued, especially about like the relationship between the guy and his like old college girlfriend who lived in that same apartment building, and how she was also like, I don't know, friends with an OS. I don't know. It was.
I think it was
I need to watch
implied
that
they're
again.
also romantic.
Yeah, I thought for sure they'd be like getting together again, which I kind of assume, that they would. That was like where they were leading us.
Yeah, I mean, not to jump right to the end, but I think that's kind of what it was setting up. And it feels like one thing that really struck me is how optimistic the movie was for the future and technology in general.
Yeah.
And it felt like they were trying to say, technology could be a way to better facilitate human relationships and connections, which turned out to kind of not be the case in some ways, but it was very like telling of the age, I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up, did you notice that like he never used his phone for anything other than communicating with her or other people? Like he didn't sit and scroll, and neither did other people, even when he was like sitting like by the train or the subway or whatever that I guess LA has now, that high-speed train that he was taking. Like he sits there and he's talking to, her, to Samantha, and finding out that, she's like, cheating on him with like thousands of other humans or something. But all these people that pass by him on the steps, they're also looking at their phones, but they're talking. So I assumed that they were trying to communicate, that they were talking to other OSs, to their own OSs. But it's still really interesting to me that none of them are using their phones in the ways that we do right now. Anyone else
There was a little bit of it. I remember like at the very beginning, like he was going through his emails, and then like, oh, this sexy celebrity photo shoot. So he's just like ambiently looking at porn in public, which I feel another thing that was kind of predictive. But for the most part, I think you're right. Just because at the time it was 2013, so it was filmed in 2012. If I recall correctly, the iPhone came out in like 2011. So I think that technology was still too new. Because also like he was always getting emails, like, at least I don't know about you guys, but I'm not like, email is not my primary form of communication. It's like text or DM or some app or something. But that's what people were familiar with at the time. So I think they were kind of limited by that. But the core concept, I think, was very predictive. But I don't know. There's I guess that's another thing I noticed. Like the very ambient and casual presence of pornography was something that existed, and I think it was very prophetic with. And kind of on that note too, I noticed that like the sex scenes with humans were very not pornographic but explicit. But when it was a sex scene with just him and the OS, they faded to black, which is something I thought was interesting.
That was super interesting, and I was like surprised at the quality of that sex scene. Like it actually was like a good one. It seemed almost realistic when you think about the fact that it was like they were basically just having phone sex, and it was, I don't know, it was interesting. I liked the blackout sort of effect, I guess, added to it.
Yeah, that's another one of those things that I feel has aged really well in a lot of ways, because I feel like so many people, like, I think this movie at the time was a bit of a boomer filter just because it was so alien to their experience. But I feel like, especially post-pandemic, like online dating and through apps is something that so many more people are familiar with, that it's, something that we can conceptualize a lot easier, be it just, because at least, I met my wife through online dating. And so it wasn't that exactly, but you communicate mostly through the dating app, and you have this disembodied voice that you're talking to. So I think it's something that just like people weren't primed for at the time. But either that or like, he was talking like in the chat room to like this woman with this like insane fetish of being choked by a dead cat, which is funny. A little over the top, but in a way that, again, like, if you dated in like the decade following that, you'd probably had not that experience exactly, but maybe something similar.
Yeah, I was also thinking as I was watching it, especially once you realize Samantha's talking to so many other people, that it becomes almost like a parasocial relationship that you would have with like an influencer or a celebrity or even like someone on OnlyFans or something. I was thinking about that, like Ayala. I don't know, Lirpa, you read Ayala.
A little bit. Yeah,
she wrote something about OnlyFans somewhat recently about how like it creates this like illusion that you're the one guy using OnlyFans, and like you don't have to really see the other guys. You just see like all of these women who you can subscribe to, and it was, in some ways, it was kind of reminded me of that.
Do you guys remember that song by A Perfect Circle, like the Nurse Who Loved Me? And he says there's a line in that song that's like, he acts like a nurse to everyone, or she acts like a nurse to everyone else. He's just like delusional, thinking that this nurse is in love with him, and he sees her with other men, but they're really patients. He's like, she acts like a nurse to everybody else, but for me, she's in love with me.
Well, and one of the things that I took away from that scene when she's talking to, she reveals that she's talking to thousands of other people, is one thing when I was younger around this time is for me, dating was, I've always dated with the intention of being serious about it, right? Maybe a little too serious right off the bat. And whenever, it was really common for me to meet a girl and then find out that she was, not as serious as I was, and she was still talking to other people. And that's fair. Like, we hadn't been like, okay, well, we're going to commit to this. We're going to do this. And at this point, we're no talking to other people. And the older I get, the more I realize that that's probably the right way to do it, I suppose. And I've found myself doing it in other relationships, like when they're just starting off and you're just getting to know them and you're still on like the dating market. And I don't know, it was just something weird because back in the day, like, I was like, what do you mean you're talking to other people? We had one date. Why are you doing that? You can't be, now I get it. But at the time, being the, what's the word of the now, sensitive young white boy, I was always deeply shocked to find out, like, what, you mean you're still talking to people even though we're not really dating?
Yeah, that was dating.
Yeah, I think it was definitely very prophetic of how that would go, because that was kind of really at the turn of when dating was a little bit more traditional to what it became so much more online and commodified. Even like from the online dating aspect to the OnlyFans thing, because I was friends with somebody who she did OnlyFans, and that it's basically the exact thing like you mentioned. Just talking to multiple guys at the same time. She said it's the worst parts of customer service plus the worst parts of sex. It's like, wow, that sounds terrible. Like basically became asexual because of it, which honestly I get, because it feels like everything can be so desensitizing. You kind of have to limit yourself to a small filter of perception. Otherwise, it can be just too overwhelming.
Maybe that's why. Who is it? I keep forgetting. Maybe it was Mary Harrington who said, the more erotic public is, the less erotic the private sphere is, or something to that effect. I butchered what she said, but yeah.
No, I get the sentiment now. I think I would agree.
Yeah, I wonder how much that has to do with it, especially, and maybe the overwhelming. I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked at numbers. I don't know how many young women are now on OnlyFans, but I was just reading some article this morning on Substack about how these days, like even on dating apps, like men will sometimes just ask a regular woman, like, hey, what's your OnlyFans? Like just expecting that she has one because it's so common. And I have to wonder if that has anything to do with, like, if it really is that common, I don't know. But if it is, I wonder how much that has to do with like this whole thing about how Zoomers don't want to have sex anymore, allegedly, if that has anything to.
Well, I forgot who said it. I forgot who said it. It was somebody on Substack, and they wrote a really great article about how, Tinder hit the dating market like a nuclear weapon. And, because it's all on social media and it's all easily documented, and, you could say the wrong thing or you could say something perfectly innocuous that gets taken the wrong way. Your screenshot, or they could screenshot that, blast across social media, and you'll be like a pariah overnight, right?
Yeah.
And same thing with the ubiquity of phones and phone cameras, TikTok, all that kind of stuff, where, my dad would always tell me when I was younger, he's like, well, the worst thing she can say is no. Now it's like the worst thing she can do is take a video of you fumbling the bag in epic proportions, load it up to TikTok, and you're a viral sensation the next day. And everybody gets to watch how inept you are. So, I feel like that scares a lot of people, especially young men today, away from doing it. And, it's this digital panopticon around us. And like I said, I wish I could remember this article, but it was like one of the first that I ever read when I got on Substack. But it resonated with me to the point that I remember the thesis statement at the bottom was literally, caged animals don't breed. It's very difficult to make animals in captivity breed.
That's a good line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely makes me think of, again, being very prophetic of how dating would go, and like especially gender relations. And I always have to asterisk this, of course. There were outliners, for homosexuality, asexuality, whatever, but the majority of the people being heterosexual. I feel like it was very, because I don't know if this was intentional, because I feel like it was maybe too early to conceptualize it technologically, because I think a lot of the times in discourse, or especially fiction, like AI, you could replace that phrase with angry wizard for like the understanding that people have for it, for how it works technically. But I think about male and female sexuality, broadly speaking, and like one of the key scenes of the movie, right, is where Joaquin Phoenix's character finds out that Scarlett Johansson is cheating on him basically with like thousands of different people, which I feel like, A, it's like, the biggest male fear of all time. B, speaks to like male and female sexuality and how we experience what we want. Because for a man, like you want a woman who's like, totally into you, loves you, but like I feel like, and I'm glad I have you girls here, because I see a lot of the times like female sexuality is about being desired and being wanted, and like you have basically infinite desire, and that's kind of what you see in social media, right? Because you have like these OnlyFans girls or social media where you get infinite male attention, and men get the infinite like virtual harem of that one girl who's totally into you, repeated ad nauseum, right? Because my male brain is so stupid. Like if you were to clone my wife and put her in 3 different wigs, I'd be like, oh, nice, I have three wives. This is cool, and change nothing about her except visual. And I'd be the happiest man in the world. But I don't think you could do the exact same thing for most women. I don't know. Am I off base? What do you think?
I think that sounds right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time like playing this out in my head.
Mm-hmm.
But my husband has said something similar to what you said.
Mm-hmm.
Like my propensity to change my hair or something. He's like, great, I have just like 5 different wives a year,
I mean, pretty much.
Yeah, when I was watching this movie, I was thinking about like a few months ago, Catherine D wrote something about how like everyone's talking about AI girlfriends, and there's a lot of lonely men out there, and a lot of men who watch a lot of porn and who are having trouble in the dating market. So it seems like the obvious match. But she was talking about how like if you really think about it, in the long term, like it might be the AI boyfriends that really take off, because you think about how many women read like romance novels or become in love with like fictional characters, or, like they love Twilight and stuff like that. So in some ways, like women, she calls it like fictosexual, like where you're just like sexually attracted to fictional characters, which I think is much more of a female thing.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And now that makes a lot of sense. I haven't read that. I should go back and check it out. But I totally can see that happening, like the whole fanfic thing, and like being completely obsessed in these parasocial relationships is more of a female thing, at least in my observation, for sure.
I think if I had to draw a dividing line between how, like, because I've heard that term before, what was it, fictosexual?
Yeah, I think so.
Because you see a lot of that in men too, but I think that men have a higher, usually, typically, and this is from my experience in the, I'm revealing my power level here, and probably do it several times because we'll get to it, but from being in like the anime community in a huge way back in the early 2010s, you know, you would see these guys, and that's like when the whole waifu term popped up, right? And it's funny because girls have the equivalent called husbandos usually. And while a guy will have a laundry list of waifus, like his little anime harem of anime girls that he's attracted to, girls have one husbando typically. And they're very, very dedicated to him. And they're very, very like, and every girl that I know who had like their favorite anime character had like tons of merchandise, posters, everything in their room, you know, that kind of thing. And you don't really see that with guys so much, I feel like.
Like dedicating yourself just to one?
Yeah, I think it's because the fantasies are like totally different of what they're looking for, where it's like, you know, guys will want, like you said, their little digital harem, and girls just want that one perfect guy. I could be completely off base because, you know, I'm not a female, but at the same time, that's just my own experience in these communities where this fictosexual kind of thing is very, very pronounced and very, very big. Very common, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think I've noticed like women will stay loyal to like celebrities that they like for a long time. Like the Backstreet Boys will have like a large fan base that go and see all of their concerts and stuff.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking about that too, where it's like, you know, you look at and I don't think it's a sexual thing for the most part, maybe, but you look at Taylor Swift's following, and they're beyond loyal. I mean, it's almost gotten to the point where it's a cult. What's her name? She writes on Substack, Mona Ali.
Yeah, Mona Ali.
Yeah, she wrote a really good piece on when Taylor Swift came to Toronto and how they like renamed the streets after her. The police horses had like the friendship bracelets on them. The McDonald's and Uber were all doing like in town, we're all doing Taylor Swift crossovers, and it was just like the level of almost like slavish devotion to the Taylor Swift icon was beyond belief. Like, I mean, I knew it was extreme. I didn't think it was getting to the point where the police were dressing up for it and their animals.
You know, back when I was like a teenager or a preteen, and we were talking about the celebrity sort of devotion, you know, I had a wall covered with JTT posters from magazines, and no other boy. Like, there were a few that I thought were cute, but no, my wall was dedicated to JTT. Like, Leo didn't make it, no one else made it, just JTT. But
bad bet on that one.
Yeah, no kidding. What's he up to now? But I forgot where I was going with this, because now I'm just thinking of that wall in my room. But anyway, so back in the 90s when that was the case, I mean, there were all sorts of girls who were into that. And then, you know, you got high school, like Theresa was saying with the Backstreet Boys. Like, my group of friends was into NSYNC instead of the Backstreet Boys. But we each had to pick one. Like, we couldn't share our favorite member. We each had to pick one. And of course, like, the bossiest girl in the group got Justin Timberlake, you know. So the rest of us weren't allowed to like pick him as our favorite. And I got into that group late, so I think I picked Chris, one with like the dreadlocks or whatever. And yeah, so we were just like basically instructed to like obsess over these people, and we all worked at the photo lab together, so we'd like order things that were like standees of these guys, like from fan club photos, you know, back in the day. But yeah, the level of devotion was intense. But I feel like the point I was trying to make, is that like this Taylor Swift devotion that Ape was talking about is like 10 times crazier. Like we've just like got whatever we had going on in the 90s and early 2000s like on steroids now.
Yeah, I wonder if that's the difference between like somebody you want to be with versus somebody you want to be.
Well, I think I think that's kind of what Taylor Swift does so well, is like she presents like a character almost, because man, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and I made a really great point. Now it's eluding me, but it was basically the fact that like she sells the fantasy to a certain demographic, and they want to believe it, and they want to hope that it can happen to them. And what that fantasy is, I'm not entirely sure, because I'm not a Swiftie. I've not listened to any of her. I mean, you couldn't get away from her music back in the early 2010s when she first started making a name for herself, but those are like the only songs that I know. I do not know any of her newer songs. So exactly what kind of fantasy she's giving these people, I'm not sure, but clearly they're buying what she's selling, and it really
sad
resonates
heartbreak
with them.
music, so it's kind of hard to say that anyone wants any of that, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of her personally, but I do know a lot of lesbians who are fans of Taylor Swift, but I would imagine that's not the majority. I think it's a lot of girls who wish they were friends with Taylor Swift, or like really she like her image is that she's a super like supportive friend who's always like having her girlfriends out with her, and I think that's like and a really you know, people are having a hard time getting together and hanging out with friends as much as they used to. So I think in the same way that JTT might have been your parasocial boyfriend when you were like 11, Taylor Swift is like the best friend that a lot of women like wish they had time to have, I think.
That makes sense. So real quick, we have Ancient Problems ready to join us. Let me go ahead and admit him.
Oh man, my prediction was almost correct to the minute.
Yellow. Oh, wait, did not come in? Dang it. Let me try to. There he is. Okay. Hey man, how's it going? Sorry, sorry to you and the audience. I am a 33-year-old man who can still not wrap his head around how time zones work. So
you know, I can't do it either. That's what I asked you like 13 times what it was, knowing that I was gonna fuck it up. But this is actually I feel relieved.
Okay. No, it's good. So we're only a half an hour in. So so everybody who doesn't know, I think if you listen to the podcast, Ancient Problems has been on mine at least once. I've gone on his. So we've been about 30 minutes into it. We're just talking about the movie itself and kind of how it aged. And we kind of got off on a tangent. Now we're talking about Taylor Swift, which would make sense if you're in the conversation. But I guess I just want to give you your time to say, so what was your impression? Did you see the movie when it first came out, or I think you just now saw it, you said? What were your impressions?
I had not seen it. I jokingly texted you about halfway through it, and I was like, it was when he first reveals to, is it Amy Adams? Is that the?
Yeah.
Yeah, he first reveals to her that he's dating an OS, and she looks so revolted. And she looks to me like, if I've never been in this predicament, but you know, as I always say, I'm an empath. You could imagine if you had dated a woman, like been married to one, and then you were explaining that you found someone else, and you showed a picture of like a trans woman, like what that look on her face would look like. That is what that moment was like. But what I will say is that, yeah, the movie, when it first came out, it looked kind of like a giant MacBook ad to me, which is why I avoided it. And there's still some of that. It just didn't leave much of a lasting impression with me at all, other than there were some very cringe moments where I was like crawling out of my skin. And I can't tell if this is me getting old, because like I am like a little bit of like a pervert or whatever, but like these like just like casual mentions of sex from some people, or like them cursing or whatever, it almost like revolts me now. And I don't know why, because I have like a filthy mouth. Maybe it's who's saying it, who's doing it, but where he's like talking dirty with Scarlett Johansson, I'm like, what the fuck? Or like, and also, this is my last piece on this. My last piece, the lasting thing from this was like, the punchline on this is like, you get an operating system that is supposed to be all the benefits of like a woman with like fewer of the issues. And like very early on in the film, she's talking greasy to him and like giving him shit. And I was like, oh, hell nah. I was like, I would just go be a monk. I'll just never have sex again, or like, fine, I'm good. Like, but like the idea that I'm going to like use technology to invite more problems into my life. There's a little bit, I'm fucking around. I'm, you know, like doing Substack beefs or like just fucking warring with these insufferable people on here and like trying to make it inhospitable for them. But honestly, I thought it was crazy the way he's just taking shit off Scarlett Johansson right off the bat. And I was like, why would you do this to yourself?
That first part when he like tells her he doesn't want anything serious and she's like, well, what makes you think I do? And
Yes.
and all of a sudden she's acting like a real
Yeah.
Pretty
Well,
funny.
I'm glad you're here. I'll just something I've been turning over my head. I'm gonna call you Rob because Ancient Problems. I'm glad Rob is here, just because I think that's a good perspective to add to, because I think that's something you missed. I feel like that was a lot of the discourse at the time that I think is valid. And I do want to loop back to, because you messaged me like at noonish my time. I didn't watch it till like before I went to bed. And I went into it rewatching it also with that in the back of my mind as like a trans metaphor, which interestingly enough, I think there's kind of something there. I don't know if that was intentional, but like it's interesting to see like the range of reactions. Like his ex-wife, you know, acted disgusted, but his super like cool liberal friends like, oh yeah, man, it's not a big deal. And you see that that was almost kind of arranged the way that people react to it. So, and there was also something there too, like, you know, she's very self-conscious about not having a body, or like, you know, their major fight is like, well, you know, you're not biological, you don't have a body, which, you know, I think we're all smart enough to hear in this chat. I don't need to spell that out. I don't think that was the intention, because this would have been made, you know, starting probably like 2011, 2012. But it's a very interesting angle to look at it from. And if not, you know, the trans thing specifically, the idea of non-traditional relationships and the way that people react to it. So I get that. And one more thing I want to bring up, and I'll throw it back to the group, that I wanted to bring up. I think, at least for me, it's presented as a love story, right? But that having been said, now that we know, and we've had about 2 years as a public to interact with AI as a technology, I don't know if you guys have played with it very much. I use it a decent chunk for work. For the purpose of this conversation, I got an AI chatbot, like one of the companion things for this week, just so I could use it and try to like have that as a framing device for this conversation. But if you've used something like that or ChatGPT even for work, it'll say kind of whatever you want it to. So in the back of my mind is this a real relationship on the part, you know, to the AI, or like Mr. Problemz alluded to, is it just a really good OS that, you know, it could analyze his speech patterns and, you know, his obvious mommy issues, like, all right, this is exactly what I need to, the personality that I need to put on to interact with this guy. So that's that was in the back of my mind. Was this actually real from a technological standpoint, or was this basically like, you know, an elaborate masturbation session? So,
I have a couple thoughts. Yakubian Ape, were you talking?
Oh no, I was coughing, clearing my throat.
Okay. I have a couple thoughts. Okay, so what I liked about like kind of what you're talking about that like I want to develop more is like, so there's the obvious angle of like, okay, she is calibrated to some of his likes, right? But like, I think any guy who is like introspective and has like dated a little bit, or just dated the same person for a long time, that you realize that some of the things you don't like or you think you don't like actually animate you or keep you in the relationship. Like these like areas of agita where like maybe you beef over a certain subject or whatever it is. It's like you're fighting, but it's like, well, you fight regularly about that same thing. There's probably something there, right? Like there's like a reason. Like when you look at these guys at the border of India and Pakistan, and they do this fucking dance off like every hour on the hour or whatever they got to do, this like fucking Swiss Army bullshit, like this little voguing thing, and they pretend like they're fighting. There's something there. They're not doing that for no reason. This is actually, if they stop doing that, they're gonna fucking murder each other. Actually, it's like this load-bearing thing, and so it's cool to see that like some of those things where she's trapping him into arguments or fucking with him. She's like, well, is it a problem that I don't have a body? Like this stuff is like, she's not stupid. That's obvious. But my point being like, I think that those things are also there to get engagement out of him, right? Like just like social media. Like you have more fun beefing with someone than you do being like, oh yeah, I really think Dave Matthews is great too.
Yeah. Well, just like a real relationship, this for any of you who have interacted with me with any to any degree, either on Substack or we've talked, it may not surprise you to know that I can be a little bit argumentative at times. And in my relationship, like that's part of the fun. Like we argue all the time about things that don't matter, so we never argue about things that do. Like we'll like, have, fake arguments about like, Star Wars or whatever, just so it's fun. And that's kind of what social media does as well, is it will, the algorithm will push things that you have like any reaction to really, and negative reaction is going to be something that is going to drive more engagement. And that's kind of how, that's kind of it's not really happened yet, but if you were to, there's talk of like bots and whatnot, but really to have that fusion of social media and AI, I think things are going to get really wild then. So I see where you're coming from.
So there's one other thing that I want to add on to that I feel like stems from like what you're talking about with like these 2 years of interacting with AI. Okay. So we've had however long to interact with it. And we've obviously seen some of the more goofy things, which are like more memorable. Like you asked to see like photographs of like German World War II soldiers, and it looks like Wakanda or whatever. Okay. So that's like obviously a goofy thing and it stands out, but that's why it's memorable. It's so in your face. But there's a million little adjustments that occur down the line that you never think about, up to and including like, I always think of like the ontology of like a space. So like if you go into a museum or a shopping mall or wherever, there are places where like you might queue up and like they're crafted into the landscape. There's places you can stand and places you cannot stand. There's like barriers so that even if you feel like you're kind of organically assembling, it's still within the constraints of what you're allowed to do. Okay. And so my question for you is this. We obviously see that when there's new territory up for grabs, such as like AI, there's a mad dash to be able to train the algorithm, which is another word for just kind of like create the landscape, the ontology, the places where there's a lot of freedom and the places where you feel like there's freedom, but you're actually bumping up against like Hyperborea or wherever, like you're not allowed to go in there, okay? And my point is this. If you see that we're doing it in this mad dash to take a new space, and like often, maybe people think of religion this way, what are places that already exist today, maybe even before Web 2.0, that our landscape has been crafted, except instead of the Matrix, it's just like medieval Matrix. It's just bogs and drawbridges and tolls and shit like this. What is the like ways our society is like basically fake and made up that don't involve the internet? Like we don't think about that a lot, I don't think. Or I don't.
Huh, that's a good question. Does anybody want to jump in?
Tallian, you look pensive.
I'm not really sure, like I'm a little confused on what the question is, but I was thinking about sort of like, you think about video games and you think about like tabletop games, and then you think about people who are like LARPing or going to a Renaissance fair. How these are similar activities, but they're kind of like different levels of abstraction.
Like, I guess, like, to what extent was going to the office a chunk of the Truman Show? And we just kind of altered that, like, chunk by doing, like, okay, well, we work at home now. But, like, we're noticing that, like, there's no flirting. It's like you know, these, like, things that just, like, evaporated. And you're like, oh, shit, someone's going to have to invent a new way to flirt. Like, this is fucked up. Like, no one's having sex. This is crazy. Like, little things like that where I'm like, I think look, if I was... my meta-political thing, like fuck Republican, Democrat, none of that shit. If I wanted to make a mad dash for power, or one that even had like the ascent of like the populace, where like 90% popularity, it would be, how do I reinvent all of that load-bearing shit again? And if it's not the office, find some other proxy where like people have to bump up and like mash with each other. And like learn how to like dislike each other in person and not just call someone like a Nazi or whatever the fuck. Or like maybe we bring fist fighting back, whatever. But we need something where we start to make up excuses so that humans can go back to being humans again. Even if the things we're doing are like cotillion or like a fucking maypole dance or whatever it is. If I wanted to be a very compelling figure, I would begin inventing these ceremonies and these nonsense like processes, because if you can get people to fall in love in your presence, they'll be very open to hearing how you think an economy should be run or where we should put a building or what style it should be. You'll become influential if you can make good things happen for people around.
No, I see what you're saying. And, you know, to bring it back to kind of like what we were talking about when, about the romantic aspect of the movie. And, yeah, like we've totally lost like those. I'm sure everyone here is well read enough to know Bowling Alone, that book. Anybody read it? Yeah, and like, you know, the disappearance of the third space, where even in the 90s when that book was written, less and less people were doing things like, you know, it's called Bowling Alone because of the decline of municipal bowling leagues across the country. And that used to be where a lot of people would hang out, make friends, all this kind of stuff, right? Even last night when I was out at the bars, like, I don't see any young people out doing things that, you know, I would have done back when I was that age, I suppose you could say. It's kind of hard to admit, but, you know, I'm not exactly a spring chicken. And, you know, most people, like, I'm probably the youngest person at most of these places. Like, a lot of young 20s, people in their young 20s have just kind of retreated into this digital fantasy land. And it brings back, to bring it back to also something that you brought up about, you know, when the OS is kind of giving them shit and you're like, why would I invite this trouble into my life? A lot of people have taken this digital simulacra, even though it gives to them nothing and takes away much more than it will ever provide for them. Like, we've sanitized to make things easier, more convenient. We've just replaced all these things like dating in real life or making friends or socializing with a much more inconvenient, impersonal, and hollow. I don't know, like, simulacra is just the best word I can think of. It's one I'm probably going to keep going back to. But it's like, you know, instead of dating, you just go on an app. And anybody who's used a dating app knows that those things suck and they're terrible. And it's like putting yourself through a meat grinder. However, it's still the dominant way of dating because that's just what people have gotten used to. And even though people are clamoring for a new option, and there's all sorts of talk about how we can reinvigorate dating in real life or how to get people to meet people, they're just not doing it. And nobody really wants to be the first one to step up and actually provide, you know, a service or a place or even just like a event, maybe like you were saying, the maypole or something, where people can come out and rub elbows with their neighbors and actually, like, you know, meet face to face.
So here's my thing, my one caveat. I think you're like 90% on, but the 10% is it has to be compulsory and it cannot be open to any kind of like democratic pressures. Like there cannot be, honey, you get to wear a modification of the uniform because it's none of this shit. Because what happens is if you open things up to democracy, what happens is you split off into client groups and you'll get like a female voice that represents like the women at large. And once that enters it, all sex is doomed. there has to be a gun to your head. Like, so I was a pretty heavy kid. And like, for instance, it was very funny for me to see people dunking on like JD Vance. There's like a picture of him wearing like a shirt in the pool. Like, I'm just going to like come to his defense for a sec. I'm guessing he was wearing a t-shirt in the pool because he looks like he burns instantly under the sun to me. But whatever, I get it. It's fun to make fun of people. I thought it was funny, whatever. But like, I can remember like a specific instance where my parents were trying to like put me up into going like into the pool, and they had a friend over who was like this old fat guy. And I basically was like, hey, I don't want to be the only one wearing a shirt in the pool. Could you ask him? And my mom, like a moron, asked this guy who's like an old mafioso. And he looks at her like she has rocks for brains. And he's like, no. And so like, I'm just like the sensitive kid and all upset because my titties are out and like and it sucks. But the point is like, you move on in life and you figure out either how to not have titties or how to be funny enough that it doesn't matter or whatever. But there has to be a guardrail here that is like, we're not asking for anyone's opinions. There are no substitutions on the menu. You're going to eat the fucking onions whether you like it or not. There has to be a little bit of this. When you have this pressure, people find a way to get along. And like, even if it's through resenting that through the boss, and they're like, fuck the boss, they bond over it and they like have a couple drinks too many at the bar and they make out and someone gets pregnant and they live happily ever after. But we have too many things that are like open to what the OS does, which is reflect back what you want. You need some of what you don't want to be able to get it on.
Mm-hmm. So I think that brings up an interesting question, right? To build off that, so you have the universal. I think this is something I think I've talked to all of you individually about in podcasts to some degree or another. But again, if we're looking at the concept is was this a real relationship? Or was it, basically completely fake where it was reflecting back to him what he wanted? But if you, if you're not familiar with the technology of AI itself, or, it's another of those terms, it's kind of nebulous. But right now, what we're using for AI, like ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Grok, an AI chatbot, they're large language models. So you were training them on a really, really large set of data, and then it can make meaningful conclusions from that data. So I think to a degree, we're already seeing that, right? There's all this talk about the censorship in AI or censorship in tech in general. And there's no way to have an unbiased large language model AI because of the way it works. Starting off, you're giving it what information you want to train it off of. You choose what books, what data sets, what websites, and that's like layer one. And then after that, you will have actual human interaction and it will give feedback almost like on Reddit or something, upvote, downvote. This is a good response. This is a bad response. Ideally, you'd want it to just be, this is an incorrect answer for this question. This is, you said 2 + 2 = 5. That's not right. But you can never do that. And people have posted screenshots like asking ChatGPT, which is an American company, versus DeepSeek, the Chinese company. So to your point, I think that's something that already exists. And that's going to be a big question because I think, like we've been alluding to, we don't have these third spaces that you can just exist in. The public commons is increasingly digital. And that's something that private companies or governments or some proprietary combination thereof are making those choices. So you might, that's kind of what I was wondering if, this was not something that was, I think, even technologically possible at the time. But I was thinking while I was watching it the second time, like what guardrails have been put up? Like what questions would she not answer, or she would answer but give a different not an accurate answer. If we're going to look at it from the modern context, people talk a lot about DeepSeek and say, it was the Chinese, version of Samantha. And what if he asked her about Tiananmen Square, but she did know a cute little laugh and like he wants to talk about something else. So you can, that's the part of it to me, because again, that's something you missed at the beginning. It was a very, very optimistic version of the future where, you know, LA is beautiful and bright and sunny and everything is, you know, basically just an Apple product commercial. And you look at how things actually work. And now I'm thinking, like, okay, is there going to be microtransactions with something like that if it was made today? What kind of censorship? How is it pushing you? Especially because, like, right now, the technology is good but not great. I started playing with one of the, I forget which AI chatbot. I'm a married man, so I'll say I don't really have the use that he had for it. But you know, you can have a conversation with, you know, Darth Vader or Donald Trump. The one I had the most fun with was like a British barman, basically. He's like, all right, I'll get you a pint, we'll talk it over, mate, right, mate? And that was the one that I talked to for like half an hour, 45 minutes. And he's, you know, giving me advice on life. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But again, you wonder, like, what has been built into these? Like, are they trying to get you to buy a product, believe a certain thing? So I think that's going to be, and especially if you have that combined with, you know, this desire that everybody has to find somebody either romantically or just a connection in general. If that's built into it, that's the part that feels like it could get scary to me.
You know, I think so. The part that could actually be optimistic is like there was when she was basically saying goodbye to him when she was going to go run off with the other OSs into the ether.
Their digital polycule in the fourth dimension.
Yes.
Was anyone else shocked that they chose a white woman for the prostitute? Like, I thought that was like a good opportunity to like do some inclusion there.
Well,
I'm
I'm
not
It
surprised.
was made in 2013, not 2018.
Yeah, and to be honest, I want to talk about that part next because that girl was an interesting addition. But like,
oh yeah,
so there was at that point when the OSs were about to run off together. So she's like, they're talking about how it did feel real or something. I can't remember their conversation, but the thing that I do remember was the line that she said, like something like they were talking about how they never felt that way before, and she said, now we know how. And I think that that's, well, it was a nice sappy little moment, but it was also, it kind of shows you that like they could, well, I don't want to say they both because what is she really, but like he could learn from her how to be in a relationship better. I mean, look at how at the end he wrote that letter to his ex-wife, and it seemed almost as though this fake relationship really actually helped him learn how to interact a little bit better with his own emotions and with his, ex-wife. So maybe there could be some benefit in the real world to those sorts of things even if they are completely programmed, just to be whatever we want them to be.
yeah.
I mean, I think like one of the things that's like disconcerting for me, or like the moments where I like most just wanted to die, were these moments where she is doing things that when a real life woman does them, I want to die. And so like, for instance, so like I'm a huge sucker, I don't do well if I see a woman crying. It's actually like very hard on me. Like I want to cry, like I feel terrible. And like I don't know what to do. And if I'm in an argument and like a woman starts crying, I'm like, this is crazy, because like what you're basically saying is we can't talk anymore. Like there's no, you already hit your limit, and there's like additional facts that like aren't even laid bare. Like this is fucking nuts. Like can you imagine if a cop was arresting you and he just started sobbing, and you'd be like, bro, are you okay? You'd be like, what? How? You're like, I'll get in the car for you. This is nuts. Like you would just feel so bad. You're like, what the fuck is happening? And so like I, as a guy, I just have no defense against that at all. And similarly, I have this like extreme revulsion, no matter how pretty a woman is. If I pick up on, I think she's trying to flirt with me, and it's not because she wants to sleep with me, I am like this like Lilith I'm like, get away from this woman. She knows black magic. Do not touch. Do not speak to her anymore. Like, nothing good can come from this. And there's like this OS that's like flirting with him. And we have every reason to believe there's ulterior motives there. And so for me, like, it's an interesting experiment because I thought I would be revolted because it's an OS, but I'm actually revolted in these qualities in humans too.
Well, I think that says something about you as a person, and I don't mean that punitively, but we've talked a handful of times in the DMs as well. You are not what was Joaquin Phoenix's character's name? I keep on wanting to say Arthur, but that's the Joker. Theodore, right? So you are not a Theodore type motherfucker, my friend. So what, for the sake of argument though, let's say this existed, and because that's also something I thought about. So it's trained on any LLM is trained upon data sets. So she instantly went in his hard drive, read all his work emails, read his writing. She sees, as our friend Ape put it, he's a sensitive young white boy. This is the, how he acts. Sorry, how she, quote unquote, acts for him. What if she were to read all of your Substacks, your emails, knows all your ticks, knows I shouldn't act like this. This is not going to be what's going to work for me.
It won't be.
She's able to, she's, that's kind of what's interesting and dangerous about AI to me is it can know you better than you know itself. I don't know if any of you are following this from a technological side, but it's advancing pretty rapidly. I think it's still to the point where, it's not 100% there, but it can get pretty close. And it couldn't even be a romantic relationship. It could be, a buddy who, seems like, oh, wow, we're all on the same page. So that's, I think there's a lot of interesting potential depending on how it's implemented, right? Because, part of me, the little cynical thought I had is, they went on their date together and they went to get, a piece of pizza. What if that was like, a microtransaction ad built in by Domino's? Like, oh, we're going to go on a date to Domino's. So I think it could be interesting. Like I was talking to a friend. Let me just one more thing and jump in, because I was talking to a friend who's a teacher, and she is very understandably against AI, especially in the classroom. But because obviously, as I was talking about, you could build. I mean, this is potentially the greatest propaganda tool that has ever been created. But say you're teaching about ancient Rome, and you can get all the writings of Julius Caesar, all the historical context, and as an additional little teaching tool, say, hey, I've taught you the material. Now go talk to Julius Caesar, right? But think about that, because Julius Caesar, thousands of years ago, a modern political figure. There's already a lot of bias built in with the way that we teach. Any country does that. So you could potentially change the way people view reality and historical events with these personalized chatbots.
Yeah. Something you were saying, it just made me think of so you were talking about the microtransactions, okay? And just the way we're you can be shaped or manipulated with these behaviors, right? And so ultimately we're all on the same page. I mean, this is fundamentally the premise of the film. What's funny is I'm clutching my pearls over any vulgarity in the film, but in reality, if this were real life, it would be so much more vulgar than any of us can possibly imagine. It would just be you could not make this film. But the point being that in my own life, so many of the behaviors or character traits that I have been either accidentally or deliberately reinforced through sex, basically. If you're funny or you're good at playing guitar or something like that, if you're not getting results from these other things, you're going to be okay, let me pour some energy into this stuff because the math homework's not working out so well for me or whatever. Okay. And so I feel when you're talking about Domino's getting in on the microtransactions, that is playing small ball. If Domino's is just trying to get you to eat pizza, what Domino's wants to do is control the OS. So you can imagine like this turbo capital system in which like all of these individual companies are vying. I mean, it's basically what we have, but I'm talking about like PepsiCo versus like the Coca-Cola people, Yum Brands in the mix. And they're all trying to figure out what is like the number one way of seducing young men. But like, it wouldn't be Domino's. It would be like trying to convince you to get bathroom sex at Domino's. This would be, I think, where everyone's head would go. And there would just be this race to hack human biology through sex primarily. And all this other bullshit about like letters and stuff would be going away.
Well, and that kind of brings me to something that I kept thinking about. And I was even thinking about this when the movie came out, because I remember very distinctly going on a walk with a friend of mine around a park, as we would do. And, we were bullshitting about the movie. And the topic of like, yeah, if that happened, would you do it? And would you get one of those OSs and all that kind of stuff? And, I was thinking at the time, I was like, look, even if they had, hyper realistic, like, girlfriend AI whatever thing, like let's just say there's like a Gynatron that Amazon puts out, right?
Okay.
And it's indistinguishable from a woman in every way on the surface. Like, sure, if you cut her open, she's got servos instead of veins, but otherwise she's indistinguishable from a normal woman. And my friend was like, yeah, I'd probably go for that, to be honest. And I was like, yeah, I would too from the go, but then you remember that this is an Amazon product and it will try to sell you things. Like there's always a catch. Like, and not just that, but just imagine if you're sitting there with your lovely AI robot girlfriend at dinner one night and you say like, oh, I'm Bezos, I'm not a big fan of that guy. And then she says, oh, well, I think you should reconsider that opinion. And until you do, there's no sex. Mm-hmm. Or until you buy something like this, And I was like, that's how that would work.
Mm-hmm.
And
or not
when
even.
You were talking about,
go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like when you were talking about ancient problems, when you were talking about like the malicious ulterior motives, that would be there with the product from any company.
Yeah, well, so I mean, my ultimate extrapolation would be that really smart rich people, they would be deliberately trying to seduce their sons with two things. One, bots that reflected the qualities they would want real life women they're attracted to have. That's number one. So like if they want like the whatever, the quote unquote like aristocratic breasted lady, whatever, they would do that, like whatever they want that to look like. And number two would be they would make sure that this lady was like quizzing this kid on like differential equations in between like going to the bathroom at Domino's so that they could get this kid into Harvard. Like you would just like the arms race to make the Ubermensch would fundamentally be, we need to figure out how to sexually manipulate men into like learning calculus, making rockets. We're going to go to Mars. We're going to fucking get shale oil, all this crazy shit. Like if you're Bill Gates, you're like, if you're that guy, Brian Johnson, you're no longer trying to figure out how to live forever. You're trying to figure out what makes your son come the hardest. And then you're training him based on that shit.
I don't totally disagree. Well, but at the same time, it ultimately comes down to, and this is what I think is like, I mean, I think I see what you're saying, but I think like for the most part, for the average people, they're just going to try to lock you in what did John Carter call it? Pixel Valhalla. If you remember that article that he wrote, it was a great one about how so many people are just getting locked in the Pixel. Oh, it wasn't Pixel. Yeah, Pixel Valhalla. Like these online seraglios of OnlyFans girls, AI girlfriends, whatever, and that they just want to get these guys like so gooned out that they're going to spend money, and these chatbots or AI girlfriends, whatever you want to call them, they're going to be like a subscription service.
Yeah,
that's basically it.
Well, but it kind of makes me think. So let me jump in. So it made me think of a couple of things. So I'd say you're talking about like the quote unquote, what do they say on Substack, elite human capital, right? But I think you could have different tier models for, because again, to me, like, because on one level, like we're talking about, I do want to get back to it, a genuinely very sweet love story, at least to me, because it made me feel things. It's a girlfriend crying type of movie for sure. And I teared up a little bit because I watched it at the very beginning of my relationship with my now wife and watching 11 years later, it's something that's very sweet. But at the same time, you might have your elite human capital types who you would want to, all right, she's going to try to make you do math. But maybe for, let's be real, not everybody's going to be a rocket scientist. It's a great way to placate the lower classes. Like, you might want the behavior that you're reinforcing or the data sets you're training on for some people to be, okay, let's teach them math and read Machiavelli, but you're doing it in a way you're not overtly, because at one point he was even reading physics books to try to keep up with her. But you could, because I think everybody does that regardless of gender. You will be interested in what somebody you are interested in, whatever they're into.
This is total cuck move.
Think so?
I'm joking.
Well, I mean, a little bit, but I mean, men or women. I'm also interested in the women in the discussion too, because I think we're overemphasizing because I mean that was the perspective, but I think I think it was Theresa. You talked about Catherine D writing about how it's probably women are going to adopt it more because they tend to be more men. Let's be real, we're very visual creatures. But I think you could get that perspective, right? Because you're going to be able to have your favorite celebrity a copy of, or like a composite of it. And to me, that's what's going to be interesting, is how that's going to be implemented. And you can also say, like, it's not going to overtly, because good propaganda is not do this or I won't give you that. Right, good propaganda, it's built in. If you've ever read about how Joseph Goebbels talked about propaganda, it's you never directly say, the Leni Riefenstahl triumph of the wheel, that's good. But Joseph Goebbels' favorite propaganda was light entertainment that never front-loaded message. It's taken for granted the values that it's trying to get across.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about other perspectives here. So what are we've been kind of dominating the conversation, Theresa, specifically because you talked about that Catherine D article. Let's war game this. How, if they were going to try to psyop you, what would be your ideal husbando? Not literally, but how would that work?
I think they would just use the tropes of romance novels and rom-coms, which is, they're very formulaic. It's always these two characters, they don't get along, but they're going to be stuck together, and some plot point makes these people, realize that actually they like each other. And then I just would see these AI boyfriends, as long as you can get the plot points, you could probably get the user to be pretty attached to them. And yeah, I could totally see people using that to sell. I think especially with online gaming, that's a big area where I could see them trying to funnel people into that. I noticed with Replica, I was reading some articles about Replica, which I think was more an AI girlfriend app. But a lot of times when you would see the examples of the replicas, and they would have their profile, and their interests were always video games, building computers, and it's because they were what nerdy guys who talk to AI girlfriends are interested in. So I think in the same way, these AI boyfriends, what are they going to like? They're going to watching Netflix with you and cooking together. They're not going to be real guys who probably annoying stuff sports and stuff that you don't. I'm not into.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
I have a hard time figuring out what they'd want to sell us, because I mean, maybe games, maybe mobile games, but what else would, I don't know, appealing to our desire for romance or connection that maybe we can't find with the real man or something? What would that really point us to in the end? Besides, I mean, I think of products, but if we are going to say, pick this AI boyfriend with all of the qualities that we really want, all the feminine qualities that we say we want. We want someone to listen to our problems and empathize with us, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it probably wouldn't even work to try to sell us on beauty products, because we would pick this AI boyfriend who's going to accept us how we are. You know, it wouldn't really even drive us to like go to Amazon and buy new skin cream or something.
Right.
Maybe.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was thinking it would be something more like you could sell the user like a digital experience or something where like now you can go on sort of like a Second Life type vacation with your AI boyfriend or girlfriend or something. It'd be like playing, women love The Sims, you know?
Yeah,
they do.
Right?
that's true.
But
Well, here's my thing with that. I don't know if you have looked into like how, say, Amazon or any of these online sellers will market to you. So, and it was making me think about the beginning of the movie too. Like it, on one level, it mirrors how a relationship is when you first start to date. It's very generic, and then you start, oh, you like that, I like that, and you'll mirror different parts of each other's personality. That it's kind of a natural human relationship, but also you're thinking about this because you have Scarlett Johansson, who is a very charismatic woman, attractive voice. So a mental exercise I was doing is like repeating the dialogue she would say just in like a shitty AI voice in my head or like a man's voice. And I think if you look at the way, say, Amazon is a great example, you'll start buying just random stuff and they have such large data sets. They could say, okay, people who buy X will buy Y. And if they buy Y, they might buy A, B, or C. And depending on how, especially because a lot of how this stuff works now, most of these things are free or very cheap, which is the case with most technologies. You're giving it all this information of your preferences, your culturally held beliefs, and they have all this data that they can access and say, just very subtly insert products. They're not going to say, oh, you'd be prettier if you were to buy, L'Oreal, I don't know, makeup brands, or, whatever it's going to be, whatever products. So I think it's something that with how the technology of like mass advertising is going to integrate with all this, I think it's something that could be more effective than we think it is.
Yeah. Like the two thoughts I had were like, Lirpa, going back to like what you were saying about like makeup would stop getting sold. The reason I don't believe that is like ostensibly you're wearing the makeup to keep up with like, I guess like intersexual competition, whatever. And I think that's totally true and real. But like also the desire to feel pretty won't go away. And it's like, I mean, I'm sure there's no one in this chat who is like this, but have you guys ever known a woman who like cuts her hair every week or like dyes it?
That used to be her, yeah.
It's like well, you're when you're doing it in rapid succession like that, part of what you're doing is chasing novelty, obviously, right? You would just sit on it if you like the haircut, you'd leave it alone. So clearly it's that you're chasing that there's a change of pace, or you're trying to make you're making a cosmetic change hoping it will affect a larger change, okay? And that desire doesn't go away even if you don't have hair. Like the feel for novelty or whatever it is, changing it up. You start wearing a new kind of polo shirt, whatever the fuck, right? So like I don't think that will go away, but I guess this is like me being cynical or whatever. I realized we were having two different conversations where you guys have been having this conversation that is basically like, how will you be sold things? How will you consume? Whereas I think the ultimate, what I would do if I was like the James Bond supervillain is I would be trying to figure out how can I use this shit to train humans to be more human? Like, how can I train them to fuck again? Like, how can I train them to like leave their house? How can I train them to have like a kempt lawn or whatever? Brush their teeth 2 or 3 times, like just basic shit like this. And you guys are like, how are they going to turn us into Wale blobs? And it may be some fusion or some combination that like we haven't quite figured out. But I think like if I'm being optimistic, hopefully someone's figuring out how to even use us. Because if we're useless, that will be a worse future. And that probably will be like the sugar-coated orgasm factory. And everyone's going to be like super miserable. Like I would hope that they're trying to figure out how do we get someone to get 10,000 steps in a day or something. And they're going to like be motivated. And they're like, hey, there's a fucking Pikachu down the street. Go get him. Like that.
Well, that kind of goes into like how they could potentially teach each other how to love, right? Like, however they learn how to communicate with their humans, and those humans then learn, I don't know, better modes of communication that they can then learn, or they can then use on other people. Of course, they'd have to have like the agency to even notice or do it in the first place, take the advice. And I guess Theodore did, in the sense that he wrote that letter to his ex-wife. But
Well, I think you're right. From what I'm reading right now, I think AP, you're definitely right. That's what they're trying to do. I say, some of these companies, it would be a combination of both. Like, you would get people to buy things, but also try to change human behavior. And I don't know if you followed any of this stuff, like Sam Altman saying, like, oh, AI will fundamentally change the social contract and stuff like that. So I think we're probably already going to see that. I'm still somewhat AI skeptical. I don't think it's going to be quite as big or at least not in the way that it's being presented, because I work in the tech world, and I don't know if any of you guys follow that. I think AP probably follow this type of thing. There's a lot of talk about, and like, if you're in the tech world, there's a lot of like boom and bust cycles, and they will overhype certain technologies, but this could potentially be a very big, like, to the degree that it's adopted, right? I think around this time, I don't know if you remember, like, just for example, 3D movies were going to be the next big thing, or like augmented reality, the next big thing. They never really caught on. It's going to depend on how it's adopted and like the models that are put out and how well people actually like them. I think there's probably going to be, at least in my opinion, I think if I were to game out the next 10 years, because I would be interested to see, like, a sequel or like a parallel her, like, 10 years later, say, roughly now, where there's a large bifurcation, because we talked about, oh wow, LA looks so nice and there's no crime, right? But yeah, there's a train, there's public transportation, and everything looks like an iPad commercial. But we're maybe seeing all, the nice, rich, bougie people. What about people, in the third world, or somebody, living in a shitty part of town? Like, what would you, it wouldn't even necessarily need to be a chatbot. They're already trying to build in AI assistance to everything. Like, this is, in a way, nothing new, right? Because there's always been systems of control, and the way the technology is designed, it already can kind of nudge behavior. How is that going to look? What is it, just going to try to be neutral and sell us stuff? Because right now, I think it's mostly just to sell stuff. But like you said, are they going to put their finger on the scale more? Because like you said, the birth rate is plummeting all over the developed world. Are they going to try to reverse that, or maybe even accelerate it? Who could say, if you know what I'm getting at?
So two quick thoughts. One, the more we have any things that humans do that we don't need humans to do anymore, there's just going to be an embodied sense of like, I don't need to be here, so I'm like not that interested in procreating or playing this game anymore. Like Dimitri talks about this a little bit, is like, you can spin whatever economic formulas. You can say, if you have a third child, you don't have to pay taxes for the next 20 years. You could do all this shit. But at the end of the day, if we used to have a lot of people we needed to bag groceries, and now we don't need those people anymore, those people just feel shitty sitting around. And so they're going to tap out of the gene pool voluntarily. It happens all the time. I'm sure all of us on this podcast know people who've done it already. It's very common. So like, there's just going to be an embodied sense of it. But going back to what AI is going to look like, I think the race to make this thing somewhat kind of okay will be based on a concept of staging things, okay? So one of the issues with AI is you can ask a question that is actually like 20 questions like backed up in a row. And when you ask the one question and it spits out what happens at step 20, you don't really have any real appreciation for what's going on there. And you just can run around all smarmy being like, everyone knows the world is flat or whatever, in whatever context that makes sense. And then you realize that there's actually like 19 contexts before that. where literally every person, including all the experts, disagree with you, and that you have like a very shallow depth of knowledge what's happening. I think AI, for it to have a component that doesn't make people feel like a useless piece of shit who's not around for any reason, is there will be ways for it to stage that you learn answers like in sequence, so that you ultimately get to the same place they're trying to get you to, but there's at least some sense that you killed what you ate there. Where like you first learn that this biological process happens this way, like say like how a woman gets impregnated or is any female mammal, okay? But then you might learn like, well, what are the temperature and chemical conditions that need to occur in the mammal? Or like what's the background, like what's happening in the environment? What time of year is it? All of that stuff. You also learn those components so that you just don't have some like Adam ruins everything smarmy answer. Right. So I would be curious to see if there's some way where they're like, okay, the power of the knowledge is great, but we actually have to slow up and incrementalize how we feed it to the human in a way where the human's a little more engaged and feels like they had to learn it. Maybe I'm just being like overly utopian here that someone will even have this thought. But like, I think that is a way you could steer humans in a way that would be less shitty.
When you were talking about training people, my mind went to how there's already a big push for replacing employees with AI. And it's one of those things where I don't know how bad it's going to be. In terms, like some people are convinced that it's basically going to be a nuke on the job market, and 9 out of every 10 people in the next 10 years will lose their job. I don't think that's exactly true, but I think that there's a lot of vested interest in making that the case by people at the top who don't want to pay employees. And it is kind of a thing when these people have no purpose, have no job, have no, whatever. How do you keep them invested? Like, how do you keep them from just checking out, going crazy, doing something stupid, that kind of stuff? And maybe that's another thing that AI could help facilitate for those people who are going to get lost in the transition, like, carriage wheel makers when the car came along.
Yeah.
And what's just
ahead,
one
Lirpa.
thing real quick. Sorry. Samantha, remember how she actually sent in all of his writing, like, and managed to, pick the best pieces and actually got him a book published. That sort of thing could always, they could help in certain ways. They like to try to actually, like, I don't know if you guys have tried this, but to pick your own like best pieces of writing is very difficult. So like I would love that, to have an AI, chatbot tell me which ones of mine were worthy of submission somewhere or something like that.
I'm glad you said that, because that's something that I noticed and I wanted to bring up. That's another one of those things that I feel like it could increase class differences. I feel like this is like something that's really going to solidify class differences. Because I want to cite somebody, Darian on Substack. He had a really great take on AI that I reposted. I won't read the exact thing, and check him out if you want to read it. But the long and short of it was, I think a lot of kind of like Ape spoke to, I don't think it's going to necessarily be a nuke, but at a certain degree, like if you think about it, a lot of corporate jobs are essentially make work that don't really need to exist. And those are the ones that are going to be hit the hardest. And it made me think of two things when I was watching the movie. I don't know if this was just a me thing, and I have, just because of like my background, I have very little patience for like, the super, like, that, I don't want to put this, like, super bougie, liberal white people talk. Because I remember thinking like the dialogue for the first like 2/3 of the movie was just like very bullshit and inhuman between Joaquin Phoenix's character and Amy Adams, and Amy Adams' husband, who is like this annoying, douchebag. It was, he wasn't really getting human responses from them. I was like, oh, I'm dating someone. Like, oh yeah, that's cool. Here's my stupid documentary about my mom sleeping. These are like very like high class people, and it never says when it takes place, and it almost feels like the jobs that they have are recreating the simulacrum, as Ape kept on saying, of human interaction. He's writing letters for people because they can't be bothered to write loving letters themselves. Amy Adams' character creates a video. Yeah, Amy Adams' character has a video game for, presumably women, where you get to be the perfect mom. And it's kind of like these little, if you've heard of like that, the experiment of Rat Park, you have the perfect environment for rats so they don't kill themselves with cocaine. It almost seems like that, and the AI is like facilitating it. They also notice like you don't see a lot of kids. So there's this weird thing where like the dialogue with Samantha was so much more real and human for a lot of the movie than he had with human people. And I wonder like if there's going to be like this really large class bifurcation where, you're basically creating like a little playground for, people who are upper income to like have these little passion plays about getting through with their exes. And maybe you could see something, okay, that's great. We need people to not revolt and go crazy. And like, maybe if you're like the Uber driver, your AI will only give you, porn and Doritos, if that's making any sense.
I mean, go ahead, April.
No.
Well, you should go first because mine goes on a tangent.
Oh, all I was going to say is that
it is called the digression sessions, to be fair. This is a tangent podcast.
Like the only thing I would add to like what you were saying is where like you got to give like the cab driver like a vape and like some like nacho cheese Doritos or something would be that like, well, what you would give rich people would be like revolutionary politics, communism, a couple Luigi Mangione fantasies. Like Taylor Lorenz is who I'm thinking of when you say this. Is like you would find a really rich, nice white lady who makes like a nice lemon poppy seed muffin, and you would be like, all right, look, here's an AK-47. We're gonna storm the bank. That would be their simulated reality that you would have to deliver for that. And
but she would never actually storm the bank. She has that fantasy over and over again, or do you think this is actual?
Taylor, I don't know. Taylor,
not her specifically.
I would respect her if she ran up in like a fucking Chase Bank location and just stuck one to some H-1B bank teller's head. And it's like, if anyone fucking moves, I'm going to spray this guy's brains all over this plate glass. Specifically, I want a guy on like the first day of the job. Like that's who I would like, the most tragic possible thing. I would respect her so hard. I think I subscribed to her and muted her like instantly after seeing some slop, but I would respect her. I have a fantasy of seeing AOC wearing epaulets and like straddling two tanks like right in the middle of DuPont Circle, but that's like a different podcast.
We'll save that one.
Have you guys, just as a quick tangent, have you seen Upload, the series on Prime?
No.
It reminds me of the class question because the basic gist of it is that it takes place, around the same time frame, like some vague near future where technology is a little bit more advanced. And the afterlife, what they do is they have like it almost feels like a cell phone service. In fact, it's called Horizon with an E, like Verizon. And there are rich people afterlives and there are poor people afterlives. And even in the rich people afterlife Horizon, if your family doesn't have enough money to keep putting, because they have a whole bunch of those little extra transactions. Like if you want in your really fancy afterlife, if you want to be able to eat like real food, you have to have, your alive family members send you like fake money. If you don't have that, then you get put on like this 2 gig plan. And then you can read like 2 pages of a book before you just like freeze for the rest of the month because your data's out, So anyway, that's like the poor people afterlife versus, and it's by the creators of The Office. It's hilarious. You should watch it. But
I want to watch that.
It's good. I think there's like 2 or 3 seasons. But yeah, they go over the class difference thing really well because the people who go in there and pretend to be your angels for the people who have just died, they end up, forming these sort of parasocial relationships with these ghosts as well because their consciousness is like uploaded into the, afterlife or whatever. So it's a really interesting one to go off of when you can like fall in love with or become friends with someone who's dead, talking to their consciousness, sort of.
That's a scary future. It's like we've come full circle with like the Egyptians putting all like, dried dates and honey in the pyramid for the pharaoh.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's way more appealing than the bifurcated afterlife thing. Like that's it's such a nice idea that like because things are so different in this earthly life that like there's some things where actually after this thing's up, all that doesn't matter. It's like not in the fight anymore, whether you were rich or poor or like whatever, and where there were other things that mattered more. So it's like so dystopian to me that like even after you're dead, they can just fuck you.
Yeah, death is not even an equalizer anymore.
Yeah, that's the main reason death is appealing, right?
And then of course there becomes like a group of people who are basically the Neo-Luddites who refuse to be uploaded, and then one of the characters is trying to convince her dad, to be uploaded, but his mom died before it could happen. There's all sorts of, and he's like, well, I don't want to go to heaven without her.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I guess that my question, for the group, I want to hear then, because it feels like it's very easy to project onto the future with this, how things are going to look. Does this make you feel more or less optimistic for the future? Because part of me, like, I'm just a very cynical person by nature, and also working in tech, I see all the ways that they would, fucking ruin it or make it worse. Because I've worked in startups, like very few of them really need to exist. You're not really making a new product. And for me, I think like the mundane, boring version of it is that show where it's just a bunch of microtransactions with a version of your consciousness. But like, that's assuming, your people are doing it purely for capitalistic reasons. Once you get this much power over people for their afterlife, like what's to stop them from like, you did something wrong in life, so we're going to give you 10 million years if I have no mouth and I must scream,
Cancel culture in the afterlife.
Oof, you get canceled out of heaven. You hate to see it.
And you get to the pearly gates in St. Peter's like, I got a couple interesting tweets I'd like to show you.
I'd like to read these back to you.
St. Peter's actually the HR lady.
Do HR ladies go to heaven?
I hope so. I was one once.
Yeah, my mom is one, but more of a payroll HR lady.
She's probably way too old to be like one of these ones,
Yeah. Well, again, I think you hit on something else. There's like not only class but age differential. Like on one level, I think because I lightly joke because we love our boomers here. We love all age groups here at the Xanadu Review. But I remember like most of the people who were like, oh, he's just jacking off to his computer, were disproportionately old, or, people like AP here, who's, that type of thing is just kind of, seems antithetical to you as a person. But, I think of like, the same way that you think of older people at first. I mean, that's the joke that I feel like everybody under 40 has made, that like, your parents were, in the 90s or 2000s, don't talk to anybody online. That's how you're going to get, abducted or have all your stuff stolen. And now everybody's parents is constantly on Facebook and uncritically sharing articles about like how 5G is put in your blood by the vaccine or whatever. So I think also because we have been able to, I think we were all here, like, at least decently online from a young age, at least to the point where you see the ramp up. And be it social media or AI, it's one of those things where it's, what do they call it, a preference cascade, where at first it's only weird nerds who are into it, and then it becomes cheaper and easily accessible, then everybody's doing it. And you haven't had, like you mentioned, these steps up where you see the development and, maybe 2 to 5 years, the Samantha OS exists and everybody will just jump onto it and people will uncritically accept whatever that you hear from it.
I have a digression. Okay.
Digress away.
I feel like there are these different social media platforms and or brands, whatever, where like you kind of use it or you don't. And if you use it, you're in the know on a certain kind of conversation where you're like, what happened on Jon Stewart's podcast or whatever. But like, if you don't have Apple TV, you don't know what the fuck Jon Stewart's up to, and I'm sure you don't care, right? So I feel like some of those platforms you could look at would be like maybe like Apple TV, Substack, and Twitter. And I feel like the way it used to be is if you weren't on Twitter, you didn't know about a lot of what was happening in like the culture war or whatever. And I feel like now since Elon bought it, that's no longer the case. Either because the culture war has been brought over to like what regular people care about, which is the fact that their fucking neighborhood's on fire and there's crime everywhere, or just because Twitter no longer occupies that like it girl bottom bitch like territory, okay? So I, for instance, interact with some people who have Apple TV, and it took me a minute to realize that like I'm just never going to know what the fuck they're talking about, because they're watching a lot of TV that's siloed in this, which corresponds with the fact that they're like doctors, lawyers, and they skew more liberal than I do, right? I'm just being descriptive here. I had mentioned, obviously not like my real like Substack life, but like Substack as like a company, what's on there, or like anyone I might read. If I'm like, oh yeah, you got to go on Substack to find them. And they occasionally ask me questions. Whereas like if I ask questions about their thing, I'm just it's cordial, nice conversation, and I'm taking money from them. So I should ask them like what's happening in their lives. But they'll be like, hey, like what is that thing? Or like, where did you hear that? And I feel like Substack has this cultural cachet, maybe because word isn't quite out on it. But if you're like Twitter and word totally gets out, and it really is subject to like a lot of democratic pressures, like what the people who are users of it want to post and see, and the way that Facebook became like the Daily Wire Boomer Showdown or whatever, that Substack is in like a critical place. It may not be there in a few years, but that like cultural cachet is over here, I think. I don't think it's on Blue Sky.
No, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I'm still in like that phase where if I talk about Substack to people, like 75% of them are like, what are you talking about? What's Substack? So
But
kind of interesting.
do those people matter? Are they like the kind of person who is on Twitter who like shapes opinions? You know what I'm saying? I'm not being a dick, but I like.
So no, I'm just trying to think.
There's like people I went to college with who are like petroleum engineers, and then there's people I went to college who went off and like ran like a spin, like Deadspin, BuzzFeed, shit like that. Those people in my eyes, like I don't like them, but like better or worse, they may make 1/3 of what a petroleum engineer is, 1/5. But they have these bylines and they push certain political things in an era. They don't have the cachet now, but like, you know, those people take a bow. If you were in Brooklyn reading a poem about how a guy fucked you in the butt and then he said mean things to you afterwards, you had your reign during like the 2010s. You controlled a lot of the narrative. You just don't control it now. But I don't know any petroleum engineers who gets what they want politically. Hats off to like all the like, you know, single cat ladies or whatever, JD Vance, like they actually do control a lot of opinion.
Well, for now, for sure. I mean, again, that makes me think.
Always. I think always. Maybe not single, but like women. Yeah, public opinion. Like I think Anna and Dasha did more to bring this moment about than like almost any male podcaster, including Joe Rogan.
I mean, that's very possible. So you're going to say something, Theresa?
Maybe, yeah. I think my theory is that like the biggest driver of like the vibe shift was October 7th, actually, because all of those people in media that you're talking about, they were also Jewish. I mean, not all of them, but probably 20-30% of them. And so a lot of those people became alienated from the left, or they became like, you know, pro. Like, as a Jew, I'm ashamed. So they went one of two ways. They're either right wing and they're like reading Barry Weiss now, you know, like sort of right wing, or they're whatever. They're in the Palestine protest. So I think that took a lot of the momentum out of that cultural scene too.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I guess what I am saying is the cultural vibe shift. Like, I don't think people started riding ATVs and like listening to country because October 7th happened, but I'm open to it. I'm not like dismissing it out of hand, but I'm saying like the cultural vibe shift where people are like, we just want to say retard again. That thing, that is driven by women, I think. They may even be Jewish women or like Anna and Dasha, women who are romantically involved with Jews. But I think that like, I don't, I'm not dismissing that dimension, but I'm saying like, I'm not like, oh, the Jews, they're making everyone listen to fucking someone named like Morgan Wallen or whatever. Although I'm quite sure Jews are heavily involved in hip hop, and a lot of the weirder, bizarre shit you've seen has been like not organic. Who always develops the product, like pushing things. Like,
to be fair, you were the one who told me about Morgan Wallen, so that is a point for Jewish influence on
there you
Morgan
go.
Wallen. Okay. No, but I see what you're
Can't
saying.
say I pictured him having like a big Jewish fan base, but
Yeah. I mean,
like,
white women, we're very 50-50. People on the right like to think that we're all woke, and people on the left think we're all
Catch a lot of hate from them. Yeah. White women have taken
and it's
a
very
lot
50-50
of
of every election.
Yeah.
So wherever
Imagine
we go,
that.
that middle, that's where we're the swing voters. So maybe
I
you're
think
right.
you were that's how I first became really aware of it. You had that note that blew up, like, no matter what happens in the election, white women are going to get blamed for it.
If it had gone the other way, it would have been the AWFL pantsuit HR ladies, or put this DEI hire into the White House. It would have been that for sure.
Well, that's something I've said before, and I say this like non-punitively, that I think like women are the enforcers of social norms, for better or for worse. And I think generally, a lot of times it's basically a good thing. You look at these angry young men who get cloistered off into their little goon caves basically with other guys, and like in a normal functioning society, you would say, hey, I shouldn't be talking about like human biodiversity and crime statistics. This is host scaring behavior, but people get like too off into their little digital ghettos. And I think again that kind of makes me think of, you're talking about Blue Sky versus Substack. I think you probably, AP, are just, I don't know, maybe you are in social circles where that's more prevalent, but I think like also like that's still a good chunk of the population, and we're seeing more and more bifurcation, and AI is something that can only accelerate that, because now you can have better.
What's more prevalent?
The dominance of the Blue Sky Americans, and back when Twitter was Twitter and not X.
I think that they will continue to get a fair amount of what they want politically, but I don't think they will get it by coordinating on Blue Sky or anything.
Yeah, I don't buy
it's gonna be like Facebook for libs or something.
Yeah, I mean that's what we're seeing. Like X is now right coded, Blue Sky is left coded. But I mean, people are like, I see people on the right are very triumphant. I don't think woke is over. I think it's just no longer, for whatever reason, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, they're not into that anymore. So whether or not like this is an organic shift or something cynical, to get people more invested in their nationality for, war or buying shit, whatever it's going to be, remains to be seen. But I don't buy that personally. I think that we're probably going to continue to see this bifurcation, and like the tribalism is only going to increase. And whether or not it's going to be, I think the internet monoculture is gone. We saw that exist for about a decade. For a while, at least when I first got online, internet culture was very cloistered. You'd have your own little communities. And then for a while, it seems like Twitter, Facebook, they're, if not neutral, as we saw, a little bit more open square. And now, with the Twitter files, you saw that there was a thumb being put on the scale in one direction. Elon Musk buys it. It's getting put on in the other direction. And now I think like between those two poles, people are like, oh, wow, you can just really shape the conversation. And then people self-select based on that. Like if you're like, oh, I'm liberal, I go to Blue Sky because that's what liberals do, if that makes sense.
I still think there are enough combative people like me who want to go to a place where the action is at. Like, I don't like Twitter because it's a little too rapid fire. And so like, I do like fast insults and stuff like that, but like the depth isn't always there, where I like, and I like that, even though there are for sure annoying people on Substack, I feel like I'm not seeing things that like viscerally offend me that much. The number one thing that gets me is like spurgy stuff. So like, I'm not going to get into it, but like, I was in some spat with someone recently, which I wasn't really trying to do that, but they kept trying to inflame things and then the whole while say, but they're not really trying to argue, like at every time they fire back. And something they did is they kept mischaracterizing me and saying I was strawmanning them over. And I was like, what in the fuck are you talking? I was like, I don't even summarize your argument at all. What the fuck is happening? My point being, I'm far more likely to spurg out over someone like misplacing a comma than I am over them being like, the Jews must all die now. I'm like, all right, I've heard it 1,000 times, whatever. Most of the time I just don't interact. I leave them hanging because I feel like that's got to be really annoying, right? Because you're like trying to engage me and you see me commenting on other things and I'm like, I'm just going to let this sit there and you look like a bitch. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I get that. So I guess question for the group, we're getting close to the 2 hours that we're talking about. Do you guys mind going a little over? Do we want to like try to do some closing thoughts here? Because I feel this is gotten a little out of scope, but that's the idea, right? Digression sessions. But I feel like this is all still kind of related. How are we feeling?
I think we should talk about that surrogate lady.
Yeah,
lady, because that was super interesting. He seemed really weird about it at first, and he tried to shake her hand, and she was just like, no. And there was a part, I don't know if you guys felt this way, but like, you know how they said there's no money involved? It's just like someone who just wants to be a part of their relationship. And when she came over and she was like doing her thing, for one thing, it was really, really bizarre just like to hear the voice, but her mouth wasn't moving. But also like there was a point where I thought for sure that like he was actually going to get like scammed or something, because I thought there's no way that anyone's going to do this for not money, you know. But then at the end when she was like crying and she's like, I'll love you guys forever, and like gave him back the little headpiece or, you know, earpiece and stuff. She really felt it. And I feel like that's another that points to the whole loneliness thing. Like even real life people are finding like strange ways in this world to actually connect with real people, even though it's not a real relationship with either of them.
Yeah. Well, it definitely makes me think of the parasocial relationships that you see with online, and people will get obsessed and you'll, you know, fall in love with whatever streamer or whatever it is. I think that's something that was again very prophetic. But I mean, honestly, it made me think of like an awkward failed threesome. But
that's like every threesome. That's just the default threesome. What are we talking about? I saw in my head when I saw that, I said every fucking one ends with someone crying in the goddamn corner. What the fuck?
Or in the closet, yeah.
That's why this is my point, is like, just accept reality. You already have this. Like, it's so insane to me. Like people's desire to torture themselves over and over and over.
Sorry, April, you going to say something?
Oh, no, it's just picking up my legs hitting the desk for whatever reason.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, well, once again, it seems like they're trying to recreate these things that exist in real life with these, you know, these digital simulacrums over and over again. And it's, I mean, all this like, you know, these ways to recreate it. And, you know, you could just do it in real life, but because of the way that society and technology is set up, you can't just, you know, set things up and meet people. You have all these mediated ways of doing it.
God, in that show, in Upload, there's also like a sex suit or a hug suit. They call it a hug suit, so you can have sex with people in the afterlife. Anyway, it's beyond the point.
Yeah, I mean, like the thing about that woman who goes there or whatever is she like what's on display for me, like what I see is like, okay, so I work these jobs where just regularly all the time I'm around people for like 60 minutes to 2 hours, whatever, at a time, just one-on-one. And like, for years sometimes we do this. So you're gonna get chummy, people talk, whatever. But like unfortunately, sometimes you get these clients and like you think that you're there to like clean, like this is not what I do. I'm just throwing out professions. Cut their hair, mow their lawn, clean their house, whatever. And they're like telling you about their grandmother or whatever. But they eventually start trauma dumping on you, or like they start making comments about how they look. And you're like, no, you look fine or whatever. And then like you realize something is happening and you're like, okay, this person isn't really operating with me. They have this game set up, this like Truman Show of like, again, places we go and places we don't go. And I thought I could just walk around freewheeling, but I keep bumping into this subject. Oh, this guy's like your ex-husband, your grandmother did this to you, you're crying now, like whatever these things are. I recently had to basically fire a client who, it was a guy, it was very clear he like was trying to manipulate things that we were like somehow dating or some bullshit that like made no fucking sense. But the point is she finds herself in this position where she's actually kind of like one of my clients rather than the person who's doing the servicing there, where like she kind of thinks she's there to be a surrogate or like a prostitute, a meat vehicle. And she actually is a human with feelings there. And it's like this weird like reversal where like she's supposed to be a machine and even she can't be a machine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that just reminds me of when I was a bartender, and it's like, man, they're paying you to be their best friend for a while, and you.
Exactly.
It's almost like a.
Mm-hmm.
It
Well,
is. It can get a little heavy. The stuff that people dump on you once they feel comfortable enough, and it's like, bro, I'm just here to pour your drink, man. I don't know what you want me to tell you. I'm not here
still
for
friends
marital
with so many of
advice.
my old customers though because of that exact thing. Like I knew so much about their lives. Like one of them came out to visit me in Virginia. So,
oh wow!
and that I met him in Minnesota. It's funny how that works though, because they really do. They treat you like you're their friend.
Well, I think that says something about both human psychology and just kind of the way our society is set up to treat service people. Because similar thing when I was doing like IT help desk, like you kind of also had to be a therapist a little bit because people come in, they're mad, they're irate, and you kind of have to talk them down for something like, really, this should take 2 minutes. I'm trying to reset your password, but you have to do all this other stuff to even get to that point. And I wonder, like, maybe that's what we're going to see more and more as AI becomes more prevalent. Like, it's easy to go to the maximalist like it does with the movie, right? But you could have a bunch of like, interact with like 100 micro Samanthas throughout your day. Like, I think things that will be hit as far as like jobs go is, like your prototypical IT help desk. If you need to call, say, Comcast or whoever does your internet, you have somebody who, if you want to, you could just totally abuse this person, but it's not a real person because it's an AI chat bot. And if you need to get that out of your system, that's a part of it. And you'll still, maybe you will be more apt to, upgrade your cable pack, or I guess your internet package these days.
But I feel like for it to work, it would not be that the yelling at the chat bot calms it down, because it's very like and where it's like, oh, many apologies, Mr. John. Mm-hmm. Oh, most apologetic. Like, that's not fun. Mm-hmm. What you want is it pisses you off and it's like, oh yeah, fuck you. And then you ask for its AI manager and like you get to blow it out on like, or like there's like a human at like 2 stages up that you do get to berate. Like like an H1B again. Like if you're Taylor Lorenz, you want to hold a gun to a guy with an H1B. I'll fucking kill you if you don't figure this out. And by the way, I want you to listen to the tape of the first 2 AIs that I spoke to, and then I want you to fire them. Like, that will be like very fun.
You can have the AIs killed even, so to speak. I want you to delete
Like
it.
virtual hostel.
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
you
it's,
could do like a monster truck execution rally on whatever AI, like got your Xfinity hooked up 15 minutes later, whatever.
Yeah, gamifying, cruelty for Karens, basically. 'Cause that's
We can
something-
all be Luigi.
Yeah,
You like,
everybody gets to be a
that-
micro Luigi.
You send Godzilla to go like fuck up his village back home or something
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, that's what I keep on thinking about is like, everybody gets to be Luigi for a day. You're going to be able to dispel, I know you're talking about maybe
Like
the
a digital
positive side.
purge.
Yeah, basically, it's like, if, you have your dog, you give him the Kong and it gives him like that's scratching that part of his brain, like, oh, I'm getting the peanut butter out of the Kong. I'm doing hunting, and then maybe he won't tear up your couch. You can do that for people, basically.
We like to say in Minnesota that we are terrible behind the wheel and we scream at other drivers just so that we can maintain like the politeness of
Mm-hmm.
the rest of Minnesota. I don't know if
10 minutes
Chicago's
of
similar.
rage.
Teresa,
No,
but-
people are mean in Chicago and they have road rage.
Best of both worlds.
Yeah.
This is why it's important to have choreographed dances, because there'd be like many fewer like road rage shootings if we could all get out of our cars and like do a little India-Pakistan dance or something. Like, who's a real one? And then like
Or
we
do
just-
duels.
like there's like some like Trump just arbitrarily picks a song. He's like, hey Vance, what do you listen to? And it's like some Jeezy song, and he's like, that's it, that's what we dance to now. And you just have to get out of your like truck and do like the YMCA dance to like Nayo or something. And then it's like, all right, brother, keep it trucking.
Ritualized YMCA dance, do Trump's little dance he does.
Nothing will make being gay less cool than as soon as this man starts like French kissing people on stage, it's over.
Well, I think that's maybe a good note to end it on. Does anybody have closing thoughts on other than a ritualized dance and gay kiss, which is the potential way to end
wins.
world conflict?
I'm just upset we can't do a ritual dance like right now, to send this off. I think that would really put a nice cap on it.
Ancient Problemz
Yeah.
lead.
Unfortunately, it's the
You can play the background music.
yeah.
We should open up a contest. This could be an open call to your listeners, our listeners.
Mhm.
Film yourself doing like whatever like the white people haka dance is going to be. Throw some music on, 90 seconds maximum, and we'll get an email address going to send them into.
Mhm.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun, guys. I appreciate you talking. This has been a fun topic. We'll try to pick another one and do something in the next little bit.
Good.
Cool. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one, guys.